On this edition of the program, a long discussion about the laws that guide our immigration system. What are they? How do we enforce them? And everything in between. Anna Gorisch joins the program. It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for January 16th, 2026. Your old pal Justin Robert Young here, and oh boy, man. I'll tell you what, I've been bouncing around, traveling for work, and flight delayed out of San Francisco last night. Supposed to be a 6:30 Pacific time flight. Turns out to be an 8:30 Pacific time flight. You know, a little extra time at the airport. By the time I get back home, back to the house, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, up at 6 for the baby. And oh boy, man, it's starting to grind on me. But you want to know what? We're here for you. And we have a very nutritious conversation, one that I hope you guys take in to the weekend. It is a great, doing the errands Saturday and Sunday type of pod. Anna Gorisch is on the show, and she is an immigration attorney. She primarily works in the world of business immigration. So if you are, looking for a visa because you are employed somewhere, but she knows the rules of the road everywhere. And with all the conversation around deportations and ICE raids and everything in between, what I wanted to do is just kind of lay down a base. Let's just understand the laws as they are. And as it turns out, it's a pretty confusing and Byzantine world. In the update, we're going to talk about a Senate spending package that may or may not avoid us another shutdown. A possible sign, fall of the House of Nome, maybe, and a new rare earth mineral reserve. Let's go ahead and get to Anna. The order of the day in so many respects in American politics centers around immigration. And I've got some questions, just basic questions about the kind of rules of the road here. So I called somebody that I know knows about as much as anybody is going to know about this stuff. Anna Gorisch, you are have made your living in immigration law. Can you give people just a background of how you came to this position?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. So I discovered immigration law when I was in law school and, tried other stuff, eventually came back to it. So I've worked for big firms. I've been in-house counsel at a university. And now I run my own private practice, Kendall Immigration Law. Most of my practice and the bulk of my experience is on the employment-based side. Mm-hmm. And this may not be intuitive for folks, but, the employment-based side and what we would say the humanitarian side, which is like your removal of defense, things like that, they're very separate ways of practicing. So my focus, I have a good understanding of the other side. I just haven't practiced it. So if you have questions about like H-1B, which is suddenly a big problem for everyone, I'm your guy. So I know all of the like traditional employment-based routes to legal migration.
So theoretically, if you are a legal migrant to the United States and you want to work, what does that process look like? Like from the immigrant side and from the employer side? Okay,
so there are very few options. So start with that. If you're wanting to come here for work, there is the H-1B visa is probably the most well known. It's for jobs that require at least a bachelor's degree, so professions, and then there is a TN visa for Canada and Mexico only. We have an E3 because we like the Australians enough. We gave them one. And there's an H-1B1 that's limited to Chile and Singapore. In addition to those, there's an O1, although that's not just for employment. And then the other, like if you're looking more into low skilled stuff, if farming and construction and things like that, you're looking at the H2A and the H2B. So all of those require an employer sponsor. So there is no way for someone who's here, maybe they're on a tourist visa and they say, I'd love to stay and get a job. Yeah. It's not something you can just apply for. Almost always you're going to have a sponsoring employer. There is some flexibility when you get into investment visas, the E1 and E2, and it's a treaty deal. So if a country's company has invested X dollars, et cetera, you can come on that. But that's really kind of the scope of it. And so, it's one of the reasons I adopted that phrase we heard at the AFP event is that tall fences, wide gates. Yeah. If we want to solve illegal immigration, frankly, the solution is to improve the legal process because people aren't coming here hoping they can work illegally because that's awesome. They just don't have any way to legally work. So the options are extremely limited, all require employer sponsorship. I'll probably think of one that doesn't after we wrap. If I do, I'll email you. But yeah, so that's what it looks like. The other way people sometimes will get employment is there are some categories that will allow like the spouse of a primary visa holder to work. So some spouses can work. And then, we both know people who've been through the marriage-based process, right? Yep. So, you'll get, while you're waiting for the green card, you'll get work authorization. So, those are and then of course there's some related to students, but again, you need to have an employer and a university sponsor.
To do that, to get in on that.
Yeah.
The news broke over the week that there was a halting of visa processing for several different countries. Does that include just everything from your understanding? Does that include like these H-1B visas or any of these employer-based routes?
Well, there are several lists of countries, but the most recent one I think is the most comprehensive. It includes Fiji for some reason. I mean, are we just overrun with Fijians? But there's a long list of countries there, and it's pretty restricted to getting an immigrant visa at a consulate rather than those who are already if you're already in the country and you have lawful status and you're eligible, you can file an application for a green card and wait here while it processes. Otherwise, you go to the interviews through a consulate abroad and they issue an immigrant visa so you can come in and be admitted as a permanent resident. But once you get here, you go ahead and apply and get the green card so you have the document. And so this only applies to the issuance of immigrant visas at consulates.
Okay.
Right.
So walk me through that. So that's a scenario where I am looking to come to America from a foreign country and I don't have an employee sponsor,
or a family sponsor.
How long would an immigrant visa last?
So once you're admitted, that visa stamp will get you in for 1 year. And then once you apply domestically, you'll get the green card from USCIS, and that's valid for 10 years. There are exceptions, of course. For example, the first green card you get via marriage is going to only be good for 2 years. It's a conditional permanent resident status, mostly because they're worried about marriage fraud. So they are, they'll give you 2 years, and then in a year and a half or so, you have to go back to them and say, look, we're still married. Look, we bought a house. We made a person, something like that to prove that the marriage was bona fide and in good faith. And at that point, you're back. That person is a permanent resident with no restrictions.
Gotcha. So this current change then is stopping all issuance of immigrant visas from this long list of,
Yes.
of countries. So that will reduce the amount of people that are coming in here legally that then
Yes.
would be able to apply for a green card.
Right. And the immigrant visa, technically, like that number is treated the same way, whether it's, you're getting an immigrant visa at a consulate or you're adjusting status in the United States. There are country caps and limitations for categories. And so whether you get it at a consulate or not, it counts as, an immigrant visa. And being inside the United States, you just bypass that consular process and just adjust your status right here. But it's the same, legal status.
I would imagine that there's a lot of entries to this list, but if you were just to kind of pick out the top lines here, how is immigration law different between the current administration and the previous administration, between Trump and Biden, from your perspective?
Oh, it's not even, it's a different world. And it was the same when Trump was in office last time, although this time it's much more severe.
Okay.
But the law changes constantly. You may have heard there was a group of, there were people who had gone to India and they had appointments to get visa stamps in their passports. And based on some social media vetting thing, like thousands of people just had their appointments canceled and rescheduled way into 2026. I've heard June, even October.
Wait, hold on. I'm not familiar with that story. What is that story?
Okay, so check this out. On the right, they're very fussy about the H-1B and employment-based categories, right? And they're particularly fussy about Indian nationals here.
Specifically in the tech sector. That is what you hear. You hear a lot is that, and there's a lot of H-1B visas in the Silicon Valley area because staffing of these tech companies for which Indian engineers are very, very common targets for these jobs.
It is. Even though they are, a substantial percentage of those numbers in Silicon Valley, in places like that, it's still 85% up to, sorry, I just got a text.
Domestic workers.
Yes. People talk about visas, and visas technically under the law, all that is a stamp in your passport that allows you to enter the country. It doesn't give you any status once you're here. So if you're running around the United States and you've got a visa stamp that's valid, it doesn't mean you're legally in the country. The visa stamp is just for travel, but you have to have it. So for Indian nationals, they spend decades in H-1B status. And each time they go home, because visas are only issued for up to 3 years at a time, so they'll take a trip home. They have to get a new visa stamp to come back. It's usually very smooth. I can promise you that if at the end of November, I had a client who said, I've got an appointment in Mumbai on this date, is it safe to travel? I would have said yes.
Yeah.
And now, they arrive and a whole contingent, thousands of people on H-1B visas and their spouses on H-4, just had their appointments canceled, last minute notice, like nothing. And now they're stranded. So that leads to a couple of things. First, you've got a panicky employee who's now trapped abroad. Suddenly you have an employer as well, who was relying on this guy to be back January 3rd or something. And now they can't even get an appointment until next year. And when I see things like that, I worry just a bit that it might not be in good faith. There seems to be a press on the right to try to force companies to abandon using the H-1B. So that was a big development on my side of the law, but these people just kind of got stranded. And so when the rules are changing sometimes twice a week, I'm more of a crisis counselor than an attorney at this point, because somebody can come to me today and say, I have this plan, I want to pursue this path. And I can say, under the law today, you can do that. But I have no idea if that might change. We're looking at a lot of different promulgated rules and executive orders and agency guidance and administration, deciding to re-review all of those asylum applications and green card applications that were approved under Biden. That's not normal.
So yeah, let me pause before we get into that, because what I am hearing is that immigration law and the system that we have is Byzantine and complicated at its best.
Yes.
And that now, because there are so many levers, it creates a world in which you have a very activist administration that is trying to make points about certain things.
Yes.
And there are many levers for them to pull. And one of them would be like, all right, well, we're just going to delay the H-1B application process from India. And now anybody who has an H-1B employee, maybe we're sending a message to say, hey, this can happen. Maybe you should think about hiring somebody that is a native born American.
Why don't you, have you heard this phrase, heritage American?
It had a moment in the sun about a few weeks ago. Yeah.
There are some people.
I did catch it. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're really, I don't think it's all of the right, but on the very far right, there is this movement of, it's like, it's just white nationalism. I'm not sure how else to put it, but there's a sense of grievance, right? There are people who feel like DEI disadvantaged them, and that, and whether that's fair or not, this is not the proper response. But I think that people seem very insistent that the only reason anyone would ever hire an H-1B worker is because they're cheap slaves or something. And that's not true at all. And, the right will very quickly complain about our education system and then turn right around and say, yeah, but they have to get all the jobs. So it's a very, there's something about how many generations has your family been here. It's like a blood right to the job.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is certainly something that, from my perspective, we've got a system that is so Byzantine, that is so complicated, that whenever there is a complicated and porous system, everybody's going to try to work it to their advantage. And if you feel that another side has worked it to their advantage, then now, this is like the ho, 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 we have a machine gun now moment.
Yes, exactly. I love that. Yeah.
For the
far right, I think.
Yeah, and so let's get into the asylum thing, because that obviously was something that there seems to be very little pushback that there was a problem with asylum abuse throughout the Biden administration. Now we have a lot of asylum stuff canceled. Like, I didn't even know that you could do that. If you came through and you claim asylum, like, part of what, just to rewind for people, and Anna, correct me if I'm getting anything wrong here, but part of the problem with what happened under Biden was that you had so many people that were coming through the border and they were claiming asylum, even though this is a very hard thing to actually get. It is actually very difficult to claim asylum in America.
Yes.
That there was just so many people. The wait was 8-10 years in the future, at which point you have a pretty good shot of just being kind of forgotten by the system if it goes that long.
And the other thing to keep in mind is that, if somebody comes in on an app and says they're claiming asylum and they get a court date in 2029, that gives everyone a chance to become the proverbial Maryland dad or something. And I think that I worry, I don't know if it was intentional, but when it happened, I thought to myself, this is cruel, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's cruel to the migrants because under the law, they can't stay, no matter how much we might want them to. The law says they cannot. And, very few of these asylum claims will be approved. But by the time they get to their court hearing, they will have built a life here, and it will be cruel to remove them. And I think, just letting so many pour in, really, Biden's administration exercised parole discretion very, very heavily in favor.
What is parole discretion?
So the president may parole individuals into the country. It is discretionary to allow them for humanitarian reasons. I'd have to go back and look at the statute to say specifically.
Okay, so this is not, when I think of parole, I think of a thing that happens after you get arrested.
You get out of jail? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, parole is just kind of, we're going to admit you. It's not a lawful status. It doesn't give you a pathway to remain. You're paroled in, so you can hang out here, cool your heels for a while. But the thing about the parole power is it is entirely discretionary and entirely given to the executive branch. And so I mean, it was foreseeable that when Biden paroled so many in, but that is a discretionary power held by the executive, that if Trump won, he was absolutely going to terminate that parole. Yeah. And he has taken steps to end TPS for various programs, temporary protected status, which the thing about immigration law is it's like, somebody built a little house and then they started adding on to it. And then there's all these wings and now it's unwieldy and it's going to fall over. You've got at least 5 different agencies. You've got DOL, DOS, DOJ, USCIS, DHS, and even just coordinating the various rules and processes across different agencies becomes chaotic. And it leads to absurdities. My favorite is this. So for an H-1B, you have to post a notice to your employees publicly that you're hiring somebody on an H-1B so they can call DOL and fuss if they want. Yeah. And when everybody went home during the pandemic, suddenly putting these notices up was stupid because nobody was at the office. So instead of revising it, they just said, well, post it at your house. So yes, I have to tell a client, I have attached a notice here. Please print 2 copies. Put one in your office and one on the refrigerator in your kitchen. And it's required. It's insane, Yeah. And I often find that I'm trying to explain the law and people will think I'm advocating for what is, and I'm not. Yeah. I just think that if we have any hope to change it, we kind of have to understand what we have.
Is. Yeah. And that's kind of what I want to do here, because before we can understand enforcement, and that obviously is kind of so much of the news of the last week, is the enforcement of immigration law by ICE. However, we want to believe that it is going too aggressive, not aggressive enough, extra legal, all of it. We should probably understand the ground rules first. Yes. But the ground rules, like you've pointed out, are constantly changing in and of themselves because they're so complicated. And so you've just listed 4 ways in which you can come into the country, almost none of which guarantee that you can stay and none of which guarantee that you can get any kind of legal employment.
No, TPS holders do get employment. Asylum claimants will get employment, but of course that's revoked once the case is denied, if the ultimate case is denied.
So you can work while you're waiting for asylum.
Yes, but you're going to have to wait for them to process your card. It's a big government agency. It could take 6 months, 9 months to get that work authorization in hand, but you are eligible. And the reasoning is appropriate, right? If you're applying for a green card and it's going to take USCIS 2 or 3 years to give you a decision, you can't really ask people to sit there for 3 years and not work or not travel. So they give both of those to people with pending green card cases within the United States so that they can travel to see family and they can earn an income while they wait for the decision. It's just that if you lose your case, those go away immediately. So yeah, you can work, but again, it can be revoked. And then you've got temporary protected status, which despite having the word status in it is not really a formal status. And there's a big difference between the statutory pathways that are defined and then the parole programs and asylum and TPS. All of that starts to get really, it's very hard to pin down because, again, the legislature has given the executive so much power via the agencies at this point that, Congress, I don't think they have any interest in immigration law. And based on some of the statements from people on both sides of the aisle here, I'm not sure they understand the immigration laws at all. But they've given it all to the executive agencies, right? And so that is why Trump is able to get in there and make mischief so easily. And even though an executive order might get challenged in court, it'll stand until there's a final decision. And it just leaves us all in chaos. Like the $100,000 fee that they dropped on a Friday that was applicable the following Sunday for some reason. That came out of nowhere.
That was $100,000 fee for what?
Okay. So So Trump announced a few months ago that every new H-1B petition required a $100,000 fee. Everybody lost their mind. He can't really do that directly. And so what they're doing is they're enforcing that fee at Department of State, because when you get into foreign policy, obviously, the president has a lot more discretion. So he can fuss around with Department of State more than he could with Department of Homeland Security. Gotcha. So they announced that there would be $100,000 fee for a new H-1B worker. And it took us a few days to realize that it only applies if the worker is outside the country at the time they're sponsored, and they will have to go to a consulate to get a visa to come start working. The consulate will enforce the fee requirement. This is constitutionally suspect in several ways, and there is now litigation going. There's, I think, 21 states suing over this, because I think the idea was to target consulting companies, because if there's any like fraud or shadiness, it tends to be there, and they tend to recruit abroad. Whereas Google and Meta and those folks, they're hiring from universities here, but they're hiring foreign workers, but they don't go recruit in India. And so I think that fee was intended to target the third-party contractors, but it wasn't specific enough, and it looped in state universities, because they rely very heavily on physicians from foreign countries to work in medically underserved areas. I have clients who will be literally the only cardiologist in a 300-mile radius. And now universities would have to pay $100,000 to bring that doctor in. So even though there's this rule and it's not entirely clear how it works, it's apparently happening, but also there's litigation, so it may be struck down. And that's just what the immigration landscape is right now. Everything is up in the air. Even an action that's taken by the administration then is challenged in court. And so it could be reversed. It might not. It's absolute chaos. I feel like I'm getting a sense of what it's like to live without the rule of law, if that makes sense. And I see it on both sides. I think the left is having a tendency to say, removing people is cruel. She's a nice woman. It seems wrong. And yes, the law says she should be removed, but the law is bad and wrong, and so we're not going to honor it. On the flip side, you have the right saying, okay, fine, I get it. The statute allows H-1B workers, and it's all there and it's all legal, but it's bad and it's wrong, and therefore we're not going to honor it. So we're kind of in this trap where, each side wants to ignore some half of immigration law.
All right, we'll cut it halfway through. This is your update, brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. It's where you need to go if you want to support the program. Get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. We talked about the Iran strike that wasn't on the most recent version of that program, if you want to discuss that, as well as a big breakdown. If you have listened to me and you're like, wait a minute, you have not talked enough about the Minneapolis shooting. Huge breakdown with all the clips from the Sunday shows on the last Sunday edition. That is available to you, 2 episodes, exclusivo. If you are a paying member, you do that, TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Let's get to some topics that we didn't have a chance to talk about this episode. The Senate approved a 3-bill spending package, the first in a set of funding measures since the recent government shutdown ended, sending it to President Trump for signature. The 82-15 vote funds Justice, Interior, Commerce, Energy, the EPA, and several science and water programs through the fiscal year. Another package covering Treasury and State awaits Senate action next week. While the move marks progress, more than 75% of the discretionary spending remains unfunded ahead of the January 30th deadline. Lawmakers face very tight timelines, ongoing negotiations, and disputes, especially over Homeland Security funding, as they try to avoid another shutdown. I suspect we are going to see another punt here. Whether or not another one of these bills gets across the funding line, we will see. We will also have a conversation next week with Julie Grace Berfke about this and more. The sassy elements of Congress. Madison Sheahan, the deputy director of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is resigning to run for Congress in Ohio's 9th District. In a launch video, she cast herself as a pro-Trump conservative, highlighting the administration's immigration crackdown, including expanded ICE hiring and deportations. Sheahan is challenging Marcy Kaptur, a long-serving Democrat who narrowly won re-election last cycle. Democrats have dismissed the Republican primary as crowded and chaotic, while Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has publicly encouraged Sheahan's bid. Sheahan joined ICE last year and previously served in Louisiana state government as an aide to Noem in South Dakota. She's going to go nowhere in this primary, in my opinion. The question is whether or not she sees a future with Noem and ICE. This is my number one thing that I am watching right now in terms of palace intrigue with the Trump administration. Is Noem going to survive? Donald Trump is sensitive to headlines. It seems as if, at least from the mouth of Big Chungus himself, that he has softened on the idea of where they were with Renee Good. He said to CBS, I'm sure she was a great person, but the actions that she was taking was pretty tough. Pretty tough. Not quite domestic terrorist. That's what Kristi Noem said. She said it immediately. There have been long reports that Tom Homan and Kristi Noem, who cannot be separated from Corey Lewandowski, her boyfriend by reports, despite the fact that they both have husbands and families, but there's friction between those two camps. We have played on our Sunday edition the fact that Tom Homan, at least from my point of view, is the more reasonable of the two. And I think really the more considered of the two, mostly because I think he's somebody who's lived in this world of raids and deportations more than Kristi Noem has. Kristi Noem looks at them as television spectacles, and Tom Homan understands that there's some, there's a way to do it, a right way to do it, a wrong way to do it, and that comes from a world of being effective. So is this any kind of sign to say that she's like, look, I'm not going to be at DHS particularly, I'm not going to be at ICE particularly a long time. Let me go and run for this seat. Maybe. And finally, a bipartisan group of lawmakers is proposing a $2.5 billion strategic resilience reserve to stockpile critical minerals and reduce U.S. dependence on China-dominated supply chains. The plan, modeled on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, would store key minerals used in semiconductors, electric vehicles, and advanced technologies. The Secure Minerals Act, led by Senators Jeanine Sheahan and Todd Young, would create a federally overseen reserve managed by a presidentially appointed board. Supporters argue that the reserve would stabilize prices, protect national security, and strengthen domestic production. The funding would be an initial investment, with Congress able to expand it over time. I'm just here to say, seems smart. Seems smart to me. We need those minerals. We need them real bad. That's your update. TakePoliticsSeriously.com, where you need to go. You want to get 2 bonus episodes of this show. And now, back to Anna. And this, I feel like, is a natural consequence of just kind of having too many laws, because when there's so many that you just sort of you naturally kind of shade toward the ones that matter more than the other ones, and other ones just kind of get thrown to the side, then, all of a sudden when it matters and it's really in the spotlight, now it seems like it's a crisis. But it's something that, like, in a Byzantine system just happens. Like, people just tend to understand what laws, what game they're playing, what game we all agree to enforce, and that is what it is.
Well, I mean, it should be that way, I would think. I keep insisting that, if we don't like the immigration laws, that's fine. That's fair. But the only solution goes through Congress. And I think, maybe we've just completely given up on Congress. Like, okay, clearly they're useless and just enriching themselves. So we're just going to expect the president to do everything. So I think it's a sign of a frustrated public that feels like our law. And here's the other thing about immigration law. The Immigration and Nationality Act that governs today was passed in 1990. So we are constantly shoving 2026 reality into a 1990 shaped hole. And again, you end up with absurdities like post this notice in case your wife thinks you're not getting paid enough or something. And so that's everywhere. And so we're working with an outdated system. I mean, consider that it is still required for employers to sponsor a foreign worker for permanent residence. They have to place 2 consecutive ads in the Sunday newspaper of greatest circulation where the job is, as if we're Aaron Brockovich and I sit here with my pencil and my coffee circling jobs I want. Of course, nobody looks for jobs that way anymore, and yet it's required. And then what happens is people on the right, not understanding that it's required, start accusing employers of hiding these jobs in obscure newspapers. And I'm like, no. That's requirement.
That's legally how it has to go.
Yeah.
Let me ask you just generally about deportation orders and how those work. What needs to happen for you to get a deportation?
Well, God, I'm such a lawyer. It depends. But there are contingencies. For example, under Bill Clinton, they implemented expedited removal. You may have heard the phrase. And it basically allows the government, if you entered within the last 2 years or shorter. So if you're here for more than 2 years, you're not eligible for this. But if you've only been here for 2 years or less, they can engage what is expedited removal, which means they can deport you without a hearing before an immigration judge. Gotcha. Everybody else needs to get in line and go to court. Gotcha. And right now, it's going to take us about 25 or 30 years with current caseload versus the number of immigration judges, et cetera, to clear all of those cases. So basically what you would get is they would find a violation. You get a notice to appear in immigration court. You show up for a master calendar hearing. From here, it looks a little like regular court, just without a jury or the rules of evidence. But you do get a hearing before an immigration judge.
And they can determine whether or not the deportation order was just.
Well, at that point, there may not be a deportation order. They would issue the deportation order. So somebody can come to court and let's say they had a notice to appear because some record showed they'd committed a crime that was heinous. And the immigrant can show up to court and say, this was another guy with the same name. I can prove it. This was not me. Then that's going to be like, nobody's getting deported. But if the person did violate immigration law and doesn't have any way to plausibly claim they have not, then the court will issue a deportation order. The softer word we use now is removal rather than deportation. But and that's why. So you remember the Kilmar Abrego Garcia mess? Of course, yeah. I understand why people were tempted to make that malicious, but the truth is, knowing this system as well as I do, it's the same as, the IRS makes a mistake and they take and auction your house and then they go, oh, whoops, go get your house back. Sorry. And so citizens get trapped by the administrative state all the time. And so what he had was a valid deportation order. So there was a removal order, but then a judge had granted him like a temporary stay, withholding of removal. And my best guess is that the ICE officers on scene saw the valid deportation order, didn't see the withholding of removal order. Maybe nobody uploaded it to the system. Who knows? But I don't think that was like, let's get that one guy. I think it was just.
And the issue with him was that they sent him to the one country for which he could not have been deported to, right? Yeah, which was his home country, which he said there was rival gang things that could have tried to kill him. Yeah.
And a quick point, if I'm getting too like in the weeds legally, please feel free to stop me.
I think we all want to get smarter on this because it's such a present issue.
Oh, I feel like it's our proxy fight politically at this point. But, the El Salvador situation is interesting because he did get that based on gang activity. And at the same time, everybody kept saying, oh, but there's no evidence he's in a gang. And I'm thinking, well, he did get withholding of removal based on threats from rival gangs.
Yeah.
So, it's a little, and there's some mention of Guatemala in there too, which may have been confusing. I mean, don't assume that these orders are well written or don't contain errors. They absolutely do. And so I really don't think that was malicious. It was bad. I think it's good that we brought him back. But the alternative would have been, to be very realistic about it, under current law, withholding of removal no longer applies if the home country conditions change substantially. And after Bukele came in, they really cleaned up the gang violence. So the gang threats are no longer present. So had he been put in front of an immigration judge, which is what should have happened, almost certainly the judge would have said the justification for withholder no longer applies. Yes. Yeah. So, it looks like it's just, they're just reckless and monsters. But honestly, it's just the system is so bad. There's so many people in it. There are dozens thousands of bureaucrats that have no reason to care, and they don't half the time. There are moments when I envy my colleagues who do removal work and go to immigration court because they at least get to convince a judge. I have to convince a bureaucrat. Because it's all, these are paper submissions that I'm dealing with. So it's just a very chaotic process like you said, under the best of circumstances. And almost all of that is that we need an update to the law. It would solve a lot, but I don't see any appetite for that.
Well, nobody has appetite for a solution. They have an appetite to complain about the prosecution of the current law, which again is so Byzantine and jagged that you can make it hurt any different way that you want, depending on what you do or don't enforce. So let me, I know that this is not your specialty, but literally you probably know more about this than most. In the scenario now where you see ICE on more aggressive detaining and removal efforts, is there like a master list of deportation orders that have gone for a certain period of time? Like, is this list public? Like, is it like the most wanted list? Like how, if this is so Byzantine, and let's assume that all of this is above board, which I know most people won't give the benefit of the doubt to, but like let's just say you were just trying to find the worst of the worst people who've committed crimes, have deportation orders, and have not obeyed them. Let's even just make up a 5 years, right? That have not left, despite the fact that they were ordered to leave 5 years ago. How do you compile that list? Where is that information kept? Like, is there any sense of how we would even know that?
It's very, very hard. The government is not forthcoming in how they are making these decisions. I do think it may have been a misstep to so heavily emphasize that we're going after the worst of the worst of the worst. Yeah. So often, because what that ended up doing is that they would arrest people who were, removable under the statute quite clearly. But all they did was, unlawfully stay for 10 years. And so that seems mean, right? And it also... now they have the talking point to say, well, they said they were going after the gang members and the worst of the worst. And now here's this guy. I mean, sure, he's been here 20 years unlawfully, but that's not really bad. And again, that's like trying to weigh the statute in terms of who is most removable. And
because that question is who would be deserving of amnesty or whatever we would call a version of you were here illegally and now we will give you some kind of status, which did happen under Reagan, right?
Yes, It did. That was part of the whole 1990 Immigration Act process, because that was built
was
up
where we
through
said,
the 80s.
all right, we're going to give a bunch of people amnesty and we swear we'll get our act together. And then 26 years later, whoops.
Somebody's saying, we're going to have to do amnesty again, but we'll never do it again. So, I mean, it's absolutely insane to go back and forth that way.
So you're saying the only way that you can really, there's no Excel spreadsheet that says just search by you have a deportation order and it was because of violence or pedophilia or any of the things that we would consider to be the like, no, put them on an ejector seat out of America immediately. All you can do is sort by deportation orders. And we have no idea whether or not that's a Trende Aragua gang leader or the person who runs the churro stand down the street.
The other thing you have to keep in mind is that we don't even know.
I always hate it when people do that. Or the person that is a top flight of, cartoonist. Chef.
Cartoonist.
I think I hate whenever anybody talks about immigrants, it's always like, oh, the maids and the toilet cleaners or whatever. It's like, no, you want to know, my examples are always going to be something totally unrelated to what we would think of as stereotypical immigrant labor. So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Right. So Bob Jenkins, my H-1B employee in tech, instead of Rajesh. That kind of idea, right?
Exactly,
Okay, so setting that aside, you were saying, so we're talking about...
I was just saying, there's no way, there's no list that exists that isn't just like, this person has overstayed, that they have a deportation order that said that they should have left the country 10 years ago. We have no idea what their moral standing is, what their criminal record is. We just know
most of the time, we don't even know where they are. And that's another thing. Like, we don't have an accurate number of how many people are here without lawful presence. Nobody really knows. Some people, maybe it's politically motivated. Some will say it's about 10 million. Some will claim it's 20 million. Some will say it's 5. And we don't know. And one thing that struck me about this is a quick stop just to point out the danger of relying on executive relief. DACA kids. Mm-hmm. DACA kids were here and they were unlawfully present. President Obama said, hey, we'll give you this deferred action. That's just prosecutorial discretion, buddy. We're deferring action. We're not curing the fact that you were unlawfully present. Those kids now have no path forward. There are no new cases accepted. And unlike the people that we can't find, in exchange for this deferred action, we know exactly where they are. We know exactly where you are. And sometimes I wonder if that's one reason there's been a shift to targeting legal immigrants, is like maybe there's a sense that we need to look really tough and we're really struggling to get all of the people unlawfully present and there's riots and all this mess, but we know where the H-1Bs are and that will please our base because, I don't know. But that's something that is a disproportionate thing within the employment-based version versus humanitarian, even if you're looking at an approvable asylum claim eventually, is that, the legal immigrants, they give us all their information from the get-go. Yeah.
And so you can pull that lever a lot more easy and say, we are now going to affect X amount of people by way of doing it. And I would say the H-1B fight is also a fight internally on the right because you have a new emerging coalition of Silicon Valley folks that have tilted more rightward over the last, 7 years. And that they are, mixing with a pretty hard anti-immigration right that has very much taken hold, that has spanned different, parts up to and including a lot of Latin American communities that were more affected by a lot of the people that were coming in over the border during the Biden administration. And so now all of that kind of mixes together and it's like, okay, well, the hard right immigration folks are like, well, I don't care about the H-1B people. Like, that just seems like more folks that are competing for American jobs. Get them the hell out of here. And the Silicon Valley people are like, wait a minute. No. This is, we work in an accordion model. We need to staff up really fast. And sometimes that means bringing in a bunch of people that are studying in America, but are from India or China or wherever.
It's a fever dream. It's a denial of reality. Everybody arguing this, that, that we need to get rid of the H-1B because, oh my goodness, look at all these STEM grads and they don't have jobs. And first of all, I just like to note that STEM is not computer science. It can be biology, chemistry, medicine, but everybody uses it as a shorthand for like IT. And I think that most of the people who are the fussiest about this are people who don't have a college degree in the first place and probably aren't competing for those jobs. So they've got this hypothetical faraway person that they think they're fighting for, this little heritage American, Native American, person born here, whatever. I honestly
don't even know if it's like people. I think it's a lot of commentary at stuff. It's a lot of, people who want to stand up on it in social media squares. Like, to be totally honest with you, if I were to go into Trump plus 99 districts and ask people what their thoughts on the H-1B visa are, like, I don't know if they'd be able to tell me.
What is an H-1B visa? No, it's just that it's been dominating. And there's evidence that a lot of it was driven by foreign not bot accounts necessarily, but foreign accounts that were trying to sow discord. So they started throwing all this crazy stuff out.
H-1Bs, they're such a niche issue, to be totally honest with you. Like, they're so niche that I don't even know why. Aside from just creating social media content, I don't know what the point is. All right. We mentioned the big seesaw, the fact that all these things can change overnight and do change overnight, the inability to keep track of half this stuff. Where do you think we go from here? Like, obviously we have a raised salience on this issue. You would think that there would be, a place for some kind of interest in solving some of this stuff.
Yeah, you'd think.
But I don't even know where you would start with it. Like, I think that's weirdly, it's like, I don't think Trump is necessarily the wrong person to push for it, because he is just like such a crazy person for wanting to make a deal, regardless of, like, I think he likes making a deal more than he even likes what the details of the deal are. He just likes people coming together and shaking hands at some point.
I think.
But I don't even know what you would ask for. I don't know. Even if you were going to say, like, all right, hard right immigration people, let's give you things you would never dream that you would be able to get in exchange for something. I don't even know what you would ask for.
At this point, I don't either. And I don't think there's an audience for a rational approach at this point. I think what's happened is whatever caused the H-1B stir up, there is a segment of the right that is obsessed with it. And they're obsessed with all the other employment-based categories too. It's not, they're in a protectionist mode. They sound a lot like Bernie Sanders right now. Very like, we need to say, they're
Which version? Like the old school Bernie Sanders that was against open borders, or the new Bernie Sanders that likes open borders?
Oh, the new Bernie Sanders who loves open borders maybe, but suddenly thinks that it's not fair for U.S. workers to compete with foreign workers, and it's a protectionist impulse, right? So, so there's this segment on the right that's very opposed to this, and it's just become like, again, you're right, it's a niche, it's a subset of a subset, probably of a subset even. But those people are energized. So Ron DeSantis recently tried to ban the H-1B in his state.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's the supremacy clause goes the other way. States can't invalidate federal laws. But the fact that he did that suggests that there are people on the right in politics who are hearing this and catering to it. Yeah. So you have Chip Roy's Pause Act, which would basically freeze all immigration for eternity. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene throwing in the Eliminate the H-1B Act on her way out the door. So there's been like a flurry of proposals, but none of them are serious. None of them are real reforms. It seems a lot more like they're signaling something politically with the proposals themselves. And because of that, I have who would I even talk to? John Fetterman, maybe? Like, who are the people who might be open to actual substantive, meaningful reform? And maybe we're at a point where there are enough people who profit off the dysfunction that they have a like the opposite of an incentive to fix it. I'm not sure, but it does seem to be. I don't know. It's just it's a place where the executive, it gets very micromanagey and chaotic, and I think I have no idea. I can tell you how I would start, but
go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, I would reform a lot of the programs that are legal. I would create far more temporary work-based visas for people who are farmers and other things like that. And, you know, most of my fantasies are things that are related to like esoteric business immigration stuff, but like the perm process, the labor market test, it's stupid. No more Sunday ads. Let's stop pretending it's 1997. So that's first. We've got to get rid of all the stuff that suits the 1990s and no longer suits a work from home world. I'm done with silly stuff like posting notices.
I don't know why you don't. I mean, obviously this would require some degree of infrastructure, but it's like, why not create a government website and an app where anybody who wants to hire for these jobs lists it? You're able to just hit a location button on your phone or on your web browser that tells you where you are. And so therefore any jobs that would be listed for these things would come up for you if you want work in those. And then almost assuredly, because this is what happens always with these kinds of jobs, people don't want them. And so they wind up going to these,
to the immigrants.
To the immigrants. Yeah.
Yeah, but the way we test for that is insane now. And
I mean, because it's archaic.
Right. Yes. And I would be open to something like a point system. There's been some hope around the idea that we're going to start selecting people based on how much they make. Having met people who earn a hell of a lot of money, I can promise they are not necessarily all geniuses. And so I think that salary is a poor metric. It's a blunt instrument for measuring value. And so, you know, they're trying to fuss with stuff like that around the edges. They're saying, okay, if we base selections and they're not random, but on salary, you know, that will create another host of problems, but it looks nice and it seems kind of compact and easy to do. And you know, I think that people also have a tendency to want to find a simple solution. Like, oh, if we just do this one or two things, but the whole system needs an overhaul. Asylum as well. And I mean, maybe we need to have an honest, forthright national conversation about how much immigration we really do want. But I don't like feeling like we're just caught between the Democrats come in and punch this way, and then the Republicans come in and they punch the other way, and then the Democrats come back and they punch you this way. I mean, it's crazy making. You know, imagine trying to plan your life if, you know, you're going to be in a temporary status for 30 years. You're going to see 5 different administrations during that time. You know, you're buying a house, you're raising children, you're sending them to local schools. You've got kids who have never been to India or Germany or wherever their parents are from.
Who are citizens if they were born here.
Yeah. And, you know, they haven't been there. Oh, that just threw the birthright citizenship in there. But, you know, so you're investing your life in America. You're purchasing a home knowing that at any time the administration could change and try to rip all of it out from under you. I can't even imagine.
But it just gets into the kind of like, and this is, I think, a legal term, like the fruit of the poison tree of like, if you don't enforce the laws, then you create an underclass of people for whom, you know, just they don't have legal status, right? And that's the hard part, is that it's like anything that you would do if you were to create a whole new system from scratch, you would also need to pair it with an enforcement mechanism. You would also need to pair it with the idea that it's like, okay, let's just say, right, for the sake of shutting everybody up, it's anybody, we're going to go like a month trying to chase down any and everybody that could be. If you're able to squirrel away purge style, then congratulations, everybody's a citizen. But hard sealed border, there's 11 H-1B visas, and Jeff Bezos and Sergey and Larry can all fight over them. And that's that. You would need to pair it with an enforcement side. And that's what we have now, is that it's either we are not enforcing, or we are
selectively enforcing.
Yeah, we're selectively pushing the things that we have. It is in many ways, not only is the system overcomplicated, but we have only made it so much worse by not establishing what rules of the road are even mean anything.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, you can look at the history of all this. And again, I don't want to get too much into the legal weeds, but, temporary protected status was invented in part because we made a big mess in South America under Reagan, and suddenly these people who had helped us were in jeopardy, but there was no way to bring them there. So they went, temporary protected status, bring them in. And the problem is that these people come in, and yes, it's supposed to be a very short-term stay while there's an emergency, but that's not how it works in practice. And, it comes from contract law, but what you have here are reliance interests, right? If you are told you have a path to stay here, then you're going to take action on that. And if you can't stay, it's detrimental to you. And then temporary protected status, you can understand when somebody's had it for 18 years or 17 years or 12 years, that they start to feel like it's probably permanent. And so we're in a situation now where going back and now being stricter is, again, you're in the realm of like cruelty at that point. I can say, I don't know what to tell you. That's the law. And I think, I'll keep saying it. If I know we don't want to pay attention to Congress, it's boring, it's frustrating, but that's really, and I don't know who would come in and do this. If we had term limits, maybe there'd be hope. But the
last young superstar that tried to stake his career on doing anything about comprehensive immigration reform was Marco Rubio, and it took him 10 years of being in the shadow of the ascendant right for him to get back in the good graces. Right?
Yes,
like he very much, he was the poster child of a big.
Rational immigration program.
A big, and that was under W, right? That they were,
and frankly,
looking to do it.
They were, and I will say, whatever else you want to say about W, there's lots of good and bad, whatever, I don't care. But he was friendly to immigrants, and I think he was the last president we had that was generally favorable towards immigration, because Obama was fairly harsh too. It doesn't get pointed out as often, I don't think, and it wasn't as visible. You didn't have raids and riots and all that kind of stuff, but he removed a lot of folks too. And Bill Clinton was kind of like Trump. And I always think Trump is basically a 90s New York Democrat anyway. On policy, he aligns with Bill Clinton
there's
a
lot of truth
lot.
to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that, I'm not surprised that he would also be restrictionist in the same way that Bill Clinton was. It was under Clinton that we got the expedited removal provisions, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the parties change all the time, but you got to remember, Reagan is supposed to be like the standard bearer for conservatives, right? And he has that famous quote about how you can go to France, but you can't become French. And, but anyone from anywhere can come to America and be an American. And that to me is the greatest part of it. It's the American experiment. Can we all live together? Can we all try and see, let's fight our way through it? So it's just a very sticky wicket, and I think the public is very frustrated, and they're not willing to wait for Congress. So now they're lobbying the presidents and Stephen Miller and whoever else to do whatever they want. And then,
I think just the tide turned with Biden. As soon as you saw those scenes at the border, it was. I mean, that's what tilted things the other way. Now, are we going to see the same flip the other way because people have a visceral reaction to ICE raids and stuff like that? I don't know. Maybe, there's something about the American character that has a complicated relationship to immigration and just generally the rules, because we are, as Americans,
the rebels.
We're rebels, but we're also kind of more of we do pay attention to the rules in a way that when you go to especially certain other countries in South America or Central America, I'll put it this way. I had a friend in college, came from an Eastern European country. And I remember one time, clear as day, they come back and they had gotten stopped by a cop. And this guy who was on a rowing scholarship was blown away. He was going to Eddie and everybody that he could talk to in the dorm. And he was like, we got stopped by a cop. And they didn't bribe him. This was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. They gave us a ticket and we'll apparently just pay it later. But you didn't just bribe the cop, because that was just how they did it where he came from. Cops would stop you all the time to shake you down for some kind of bribe. Like, Americans do kind of have this fundamental belief in the rule of law, but we also have this complicated relationship with immigration. We do like immigration, but also we have this sense of like, no, if I follow the rules, then you need to follow the rules. It's unfair if I'm following the rules and you're not following the rules. But our application of it, the fact that we are in an intensely politically divided time where, like you pointed out, it is all about the feeling of whether or not this law is just, if moral, it's right, if this is who we are, blah, 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 blah. It makes it almost impossible to agree on, like, hey, if we're all going to pick rules and then we're all going to follow them and we're all going to enforce them, what would they be? And right now we don't know. We're so fixated on outcomes.
We are, and short term, we're doing a lot of short term thinking. There's a sense like, if we just fix this immigration issue, then housing will be affordable and our kids will get better educations and the food will taste better and the McRib will come back. Like, everything will be paradise if we only get rid of this group. Now, I see this in a broader context, and I think, during Trump's campaign, he was rather friendly to legal immigration. And the inclusion of Vivek and Elon suggested and kind of like projected this, we're okay with immigrants, even if they're from India, right? And then as soon as he took office, like, Vivek was out, Elon was out. And so, like, the coalition immediately just started to fracture. And I think a lot of people like me who were drawn to the campaign, because I'm an independent, I hate both parties. They're both insane. But sometimes, like, I'll be swept up by a moment and think, okay, let's take a chance on this,
Yeah.
And so I've never felt so much like, this is what I saw on the campaign trail, and what is actually happening is now unrecognizable from what they were talking about then. And I wonder sometimes too, because, you have that every action has equal opposite reaction and such. When I remember the first video they shared of a woman whose CBP One app was canceled. She was on the other side of the border and she was scheduled to come in, and Trump canceled all those appointments, and she was sobbing. And I thought, oh Lord, we're going to have to be able to watch a lot of these and not let it,
well, that was the thing. As soon as anybody, we saw positive polling on mass deportations, I said at the time, like, there's no way you do this nice. Like, at a certain point, you're gonna get crying people, kicking people, screaming. You're going to get violence. People are going to die because there's going to be people, there's going to be either violent people that don't want to leave, or misunderstandings, or any number of things. If you're trying to do this at scale, it's going to get gross at some point.
Exactly.
And I think we have seen exactly that.
Well, I think too, and I can't.
But that is not to say that it's not a pursuit that probably should happen at least more than what it was, right? And that's the other thing that I'm having a hard time wrestling with, especially as the emotions run so high, is like, all right, let's say we got a system. What is the failure rate of that system for which we are comfortable is not systemic, but rather just accidental, coincidental, wrong time, wrong place, these things happen, right? Is it 1%? Is it 0.5%? Is it 3%? I have no idea. But I do know that we live in a world of social media where every incident stands way taller than anything else. And I think that's where the Trump administration is very much losing the publicity war on this, is that there's a lot more talk about the things that are screwed up or going wrong, whether or not they're fairly portrayed. And there's a lot less conversation about, like, despite the fact that I think they're trying to step this up now, but like, hey, here's who did get deported. Here's this serial pedophile that got deported. But that's just words from a source that half the country doesn't trust, whereas a video of somebody kicking, screaming, crying, or God forbid, like what happened with Renee Good in Minneapolis, where you have a protester that's shot and killed, like that is visual, that is visceral, that is something that sticks in people's heads more than, let's say theoretically, I don't know for sure, but let's say theoretically that 99.5% of this is kind of happening the way it should, that people who just have a deportation order are being rounded up and are being sent out. And that if they do it, easily, they have more of a chance to come back in. If they don't do it, then that's it. They're out if they have to get caught. But that 0.5%, if all of it is video and all of it is picture, then that's what sticks in people's heads. And It's hard for people to shake.
No, we live in a world of anecdotes. And at this point, every anecdote now takes on like evidence of systemic everything,
Yeah.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia became like, they were singing songs about him and how they love him and
Kilmar's
all. I was
neighbor.
like, you don't
Yeah.
need to go that far.
Yeah.
We could acknowledge that a mistake happened here. I do think that things like fraud in the employment-based system, it exists because in any system you're going to have some level of any system that's amenable to shadiness and getting extra money or whatever. It'll happen here and there, but the solution is to enforce the law, not just declare the whole program is just rotten. So the vast majority of things are happening in good faith. I really do think that. I think it's very hard to quantify what percentage is actual error.
Yeah.
And it seems like we can't even agree on what an error is. So it just feels like, and then I remember, when ICE started their enforcement actions, the riots were really, really brutal. And I thought, oh, please, no, this is just going to make the right go even harder at it. And so I feel like each side just keeps escalating more. And now we have Renee Good has been shot. We're going to have to do something to get all of this under control. And I have no idea what it looks like.
I mean, I don't know what you do to square the circle of a bunch of people that think that ICE is extra legal and are not.
Yes.
I mean, if that's your point of view, I don't know how to say, let's get on the same page on how to make deportations orderly or safe.
Right. ICE is the Gestapo.
Yeah.
There's no response to that.
Yeah. If it is your perspective that they aren't legal, I mean, that was the thing that was like the most among the heartbreaking elements of the Renee Good thing was her wife crying right after it happened. Why did you guys bring real bullets? And it's like, that tells me you were not aware that these people were actually federal law enforcement, that this is like, that was like you blockading the FBI for all intents and purposes. Like,
and the thing, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's I don't know how to get to the middle of like that's not a Venn diagram where there's gray. It's just two orbs that are moving further and further away from each other.
Well, it seems like there has been a reluctance on the left sometimes. Maybe on the right too, but especially with regard to the protests against ICE, right? You have kids jumping on cars that don't get arrested. They don't get run over at the end of the day. You can throw projectiles at ICE officers and nothing will happen to you. And so that created a false sense of safety, I think. And they did forget that this is federal law enforcement. And of course they have real bullets. And there's a lot of people who hate them right now. So they may be a bit on edge. And in a situation like what happened with Renee Good, he can't read her mind. She may have panicked. I don't know. And I don't blame her at all. But if the cop has a split second to say, oh my God, I just heard her slam the gas and she's pointing her car at me, he's going to shoot. And I think that we didn't help people by letting them get away with committing so many technical crimes without any consequences, because now they've kind of been led to believe there are none. And that's worrying.
And regardless of where we are in terms of the expectation, like at some point we have to agree on a rule of law.
Yes.
And that where, I don't know if we're particularly close to it. But part of the reason why I wanted to bring you on was just so we could understand at least the general shape of what the law is now. And I do believe that we have done exactly that. Anna Gorisch, where can people find you?
I am a little noisy on X at Anna Gorisch. I also have a new Substack called Freaks and Irrelevancies. You can find an explanation of that wacky title right on the page. And I am still running Kendall Immigration Law PLLC. You can find me at a website. If you just Google Kendall Immigration Law, you'll find me. Schedule a consultation, send me a note telling me how much you hated my appearance on the podcast, whatever. Just reach out. I'd love to hear from you, regardless of what you have to say. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And I'm usually blathering on about immigration.
There we go. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. You want to send me an email? Easy place to do it, theyoungamerican@gmail.com. You can also find, follow, and share video clips of the show, Justin R. Young, on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Find us on YouTube. The whole episode in beautiful HD video. Politics is our channel there. You can only get our bonus content at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Paying members get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. It's $12 a month. Do it the cheapest you possibly can at $99 for the entire year. But if you want your name read on the show, only one place to do that. That is our foundational tier, including these fine folks: Honey Black, L3PO, Peepaw, Scott, Middle-Aged Mike, Tom, Nick, Sarah Jeannie, Jeremy, Pro Idiot, Chiller Tomatoes, Neil, Casey, oh yeah, it's Adam, AB Puppy, Dr. Whiskey, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Will, The Board B, Michael, Matt, DP4 Bongo, Andrew, Edwin, Sam, Andrew, Phil, Edison, Paul, Gloria Young, my mother, hi Mom, a dog named Checkers, Jerry, Trucker, John, Berkeley, Stephen, and Zombie Doc. You want your name read on the show? Head on over to TakePoliticsSeriously.com and sign up at that foundational tier. You guys are the backbone. Mwah. Big kisses. We got great stuff coming to you next week. Hope everybody has a great weekend. I'm going to go take a nap. Till next time, this is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics. This is the only show that dares discuss three.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show Audio.